This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with a Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
My goal is to create an experience that leads the person to the place we want to get them to go. If you're having a baby, what do you want to do? Well, you want to stay out of your own way. You want to let your body do what it knows how to do. And you want to facilitate what is a very natural process without one's fear or tension or preconceived notions hamper or hinder. So that's when I do hypnosis for birth. That's really what I'm doing. And it's pretty darn effective.
Welcome to Season 7 of Flusterclux with Lynn Lyons, where we'll talk about managing anxiety and all the other emotions too. We tackle the serious stuff without being too serious. I'm your co-host, Robin. I'm Lynn's sister-in-law, and I'm here to ask your questions.
And I'm Lynn Lyons. I'm an anxiety expert, speaker, mom, and author. I've been a therapist for 35 years. Parenting can be a flusterclux, and I'm here to help you find your way. I'll tell you what to do and what to say.
Hello, Lynn.
It's Robin.
Hello, Ed.
Hi, Robin. Hi, Lynn.
Hi, Ed. It's nice to see you, Robin.
It's nice to see you too.
You were the source of a chuckle yesterday.
Okay.
Talking to my consultation group that I have, and I was telling them the story that I often tell that kids are very fascinated with about rigidity and about how my sister-in-law, when we were in college, we went to the Bahamas. And she was very rigid about getting her run in. And she insisted that she run to the airport and meet us at the airport. And we were like, we don't think that's safe. And like, what happens if you don't show up? And she was not budging. And so she ran from our hotel to the terminal at the airport in the Bahamas. So I'm telling this story. And when I tell this story to kids, they're like, wow. I mean, they're so fascinated by it. And somebody in my clinical group goes, that was Robin did that?
Yeah, Robin did not do that. And I don't know, who were you thinking of?
Who did do it?
Yeah.
My other sister-in-law.
Yeah.
Oh, right, because you have a few sisters.
I have a husband who has sisters. Yeah. So it was really funny. And I said, you know what? Robin has probably gone to more airports than anybody else you know. And I guarantee she has never run to an airport because, as you will notice, airports are not really pedestrian friendly. It was just like the craziest thing for my other sister-in-law to do, but it was not the smart, well-traveled Robin running to an airport. So that made me chuckle.
I would actually say I've run inside an airport many times.
Yes, that's different than leaving your hotel. Running down the ramp, like rental car, Terminal B. I mean, that's just crazy. Can you imagine if you're driving to the airport and there's just like this 20-year-old young woman running along the side of the road?
That's packing light too, which is hard to also imagine.
Well, of course, everybody else had to take care of all of her stuff. Yeah. I was telling them this story in my group.
Proof that she's a podcast listener.
Yes. I had a good chuckle.
If I ever had to sprint, the motive for it to catch a flight would probably be my best motive, other than the health and safety of my family. So
anyway, it's one of my best examples of rigidity. And we talk a lot about sort of anxiety and one's compulsiveness being very self-focused, and you lose track of how it impacts others. And that was also a very good example of that. Yeah. And it really gets my 11 and 12 and 13-year-old clients, it really gets their attention.
You know, it's funny that you say that because just today I had this like epiphany because I'm doing this big thing in my own business. Mm-hmm. There are certain things that need to change given certain things that I've encountered. And it's been kind of a bummer. And then this morning, I suddenly realized, wait a minute, I have cognitive flexibility.
There you go.
I don't have to be upset because it isn't going the way I had wanted it to or it expected to. I'm the queen of pivot.
Yeah.
What can I be flexible about to make it work in the moment? And then it's like really shifted this big project that I'm working on. Even if you have those skills, it's like, oh, you got to remember to use them.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to you today about hypnosis because A lot of people think it's a fancy party trick involving being hypnotized and making silly animal noises in front of crowds.
Which it can be, which is why if you use it clinically, you do a lot of explaining and you do a lot of myth busting. I am trained in clinical hypnosis. Some people call it medical hypnosis, I think just because it makes it sound a little bit more legit. Yeah, I mean, I wrote a big fat textbook called Using Hypnosis with Children. It came out in 2015. And honestly, sometimes I don't really talk about that part of my training or my expertise because people do have a strong reaction to it. So I think we can bust some myths and talk about what an amazing tool it is and how it's not kookabook. Although that's the problem, is that hypnosis as a thing is often used as entertainment. There are very few things that are both really clinically valuable and are used for entertainment.
You feel uncomfortable being associated with John Valby, Dr. Dirty,
Who is that? I don't know who that is.
who was always around Hartford, Connecticut, where Lynn and I grew up. And he was always giving rather ribald symposiums with people acting in inappropriate manners. And Lynn resents being in that group.
I do.
Wow. How old were you guys when you saw this? Is he the inspiration?
We never went to it.
Oh, okay. Okay. You're like, I'm going to be a hypnotist.
Yeah, he was my inspiration. No, and I think like a lot of times on college campuses, they have like R-rated hypnosis shows, and it's about making fun of people and getting people to do things that they're going to be embarrassed about. And that's why it's hard sometimes to talk about it in a clinical way because that's the impression that people have. And also, even when it's portrayed, like the movie Get Out, which was an amazing movie, had this whole weird hypnosis thing to it, which was totally fabricated and not really how it works. I've done speaking gigs where I used to have that in my bio. If I list my books, this is like a huge book that I wrote, and some people have asked me to take it out. Because they don't think that parents will come to hear me speak if they see that I have a book called Using Hypnosis with Children.
That's fascinating. Okay, well, we come back. We're going to just break all these myths about hypnosis and what it actually is and what it can do.
Okay. Okay, spring is in the air. I love spring. I love my kitty. I don't love litter box stink. Nobody does. That's why we use Pretty Litter. It obliterates odors so we can enjoy all the wonderful scents of spring without the smell of a litter box. Pretty Litter's non-clumping formula traps odor and moisture. It's lightweight, low dust, 1 6-pound bag works for up to a month. And Pretty Litter gives me peace of mind. It changes color to indicate early signs of potential illness in my kitty, like urinary tract infections, kidney issues, and more. And since Pretty Litter ships free right to my door, I never run out. You don't want to run out of kitty litter. I don't have huge kitty litter bags taking up space. I don't have to go out to my car and get those huge tubs of cat litter and lug them into the house. I have used many types of kitty litter. I have had cats my whole life. Pretty Litter is better. It doesn't clump. It's cleaner. It's not dusty. And you can tell the difference between a litter that deals with odor and a litter that doesn't. Pretty Litter helps keep my house smelling fresh and clean. Try and you'll love it. Go to prettylitter.com/Flusterclux to save 20% on your first order and get a free cat toy. That's prettylitter.com/Flusterclux to save 20% on your first order and get a free cat toy. prettylitter.com/Flusterclux. Terms and conditions apply. See site for details. Okay, you know when you run into a friend or an acquaintance and they say, "How are you?" and you say, "Oh, good." Well, those words just sort of come out of our mouth, but what if you really meant it? What if when somebody said to you, "How are you doing?" and you said, "I'm good," you could really mean it. This is what Headspace helps with. It's an app that helps 100 million people with their mental health and well-being with guided meditations, mindfulness practices, and so much more. It helps reduce stress, boost mood, and it improves sleep. Headspace combines scientifically proven benefits of meditation and mindfulness with modern practices. Look, The science is in. We know that even small amounts of meditation can improve your sense of well-being, improve your sleep. It also helps when you're short on time. There are on-the-go programs that help you get in the right headspace in just a few minutes. There are over 1,000 hours of mindfulness exercise. Feel good and mean it when you say it. For a limited time, get Headspace free for 60 days. Go to headspace.com/fluster. That's HEADSPACE.com/fluster to unlock all of Headspace free for 60 days. Headspace.com/fluster. What's something that your mom's always wanted to do? Get into painting, write that novel, make that perfect croissant. Whatever it is, this Mother's Day, you can finally help her achieve it with Masterclass. Our parents are our first mentors, but where do they learn? Maybe a John Kabat-Zinn class on meditation. Our parents help us expand our horizons. You want to return the favor? Give your parents the gift of Masterclass. There's nothing like gaining a fresh perspective from experts who've seen it all and have the wisdom to prove it. I've learned from Masterclass, and it's about time that someone you love has the same opportunity. If you are looking to grow, if you love to grow, if you've got a parent who's a curious, engaged learner, Masterclass is the perfect gift. One that just won't last a year, it'll last a lifetime. That's the gift of learning with Masterclass. With Masterclass, you can learn from the best to become your best. It's the only streaming platform where you can learn and grow with over 200 of the world's best. For just $10 a month billed annually, a membership with Masterclass gets you unlimited access to every single instructor. You can access it on your phone, your computer, your smart TV, or even in audio mode. Our Flusterclux listeners always get great discounts on Masterclass of at least 15% off any annual membership at masterclass.com/fluster. See Masterclass's latest deal, at least 15% off at masterclass.com/fluster. masterclass.com/fluster. Okay, we're back.
Lynn, I'm just curious. Obviously, you don't do it with every child that comes into your practice. So what might be something just that people might be surprised you use in your practice in assisting a child?
Yep. So I could use it with every child in my practice, because here's the thing about hypnosis is just a delivery system. And so the way that I think about it is I'm always trying to deliver a message, or I'm always trying to interrupt a pattern or offer an alternative. And so I do that in all sorts of different ways. And hypnosis is one of the ways that I deliver the message that I would deliver. So say, for example, I had a child that was really rigid about eating foods. So the message that I want to deliver is flexibility, of course, and how interesting it is to experiment with different flavors and different tastes. And what is it like when we're trying and learning something new? So that may be the message that I'm going to deliver. Now, I can deliver that sitting across from somebody and just saying exactly what I said to you. Or I could deliver it by doing an interpretive dance. I could deliver it by drawing pictures, but I can also deliver it using what we call hypnotic language or hypnotic techniques. And people that are very good at hypnosis are very good at delivering the message in a way that makes it interesting, sometimes a little surprising, and sometimes novel enough to shake up old patterns. And then the other thing that's great about it is that it really is using just a very naturally occurring state that we're in. So kids tend to be in it a lot easier than adults, but we're using your imagination. It's sort of like daydreaming or creating a sensation. So the example that I give a lot is if I started talking to you guys about lice, and if I were to tell you the story about my friend Phoebe, who had lice for a year and nobody found it because she was an adult woman and she was going to all these people trying to figure out what was the reaction that she was having and why was her scalp itching so much. If I told you that story and then finally her friend who was a school nurse looked in her hair and said, oh my God, you wouldn't believe what's going on in there. I tell you that story, most people sort of have an urge to maybe scratch their head or they get a little uncomfortable. Or if I were to talk to you about being really thirsty and how you were pouring this cold liquid into a glass of ice and the ice cubes were sort of making that clinky noise. And then you took this really delicious sip, that might make you feel thirsty. It might make your mouth water. So we can use language and we can use creating these experiences in our imagination to create sensations or to shift sensations, to create images or thoughts or patterns, or to get out of images or thoughts or patterns. So we're basically using an experience that I am helping you create to get some sort of result. That's basically it in a nutshell.
You have a very good verbal gift. You're the queen of allegories and examples and all of these ways. It's a very natural verbal gift that you have, telling stories and creating examples and analogies and everything else. So it's very interesting that that aligns with what is required of medical hypnosis. But could we go back and talk about the spinning wheel setup of getting someone in a hypnotic state? Because most of us assume that you have to get to a place to hear those stories. And most of us associate it with looking at a black and white spinning wheel, who's seen a show in college or whatever it is.
Right.
So tell me, in your office, I know you don't have such a wheel.
I do not have such a wheel. I don't swing a pocket watch, but it's different for different ages. So depending on how young you are versus how old you are, depends on how much effort I have to put into creating this experience. So one of the things that is sort of a hallmark of doing this is my goal is not necessarily to do hypnosis, but it's to be hypnotic, which means I'm going to pull you in. That is very easy to do with little kids. All I have to do is say, oh, I have to tell you something. And I just lock onto their eyes and I just launch into a story. You know, we've all seen that with little kids, right? They're just like staring at you and they're not blinking. And I'm just absorbing them in. And that's informal. We call that informal trance. And so I'm just telling them something. And my goal is to keep them really connected and really focused on what I'm saying. The word that we often hear is mesmerized, which actually comes from the guy who did this. His name was Mesmer. And so it's mesmerized from his name. With older kids and with adults, there's a more formal process. So it might sound like this. I am going to help you get into a place where you're really focused on what I say. And I'm really going to harness that amazing imagination you have. Because I know from talking to you, you have this really incredible imagination. So why don't you just sit back a little bit? You can close your eyes if you want. You don't have to, but you can if you want. If you keep your eyes open, you might notice after a little while that your eyelids start to feel a little heavier, and it might be just comfortable to close them. So you can if you want, and then boom, they close. And then I just start saying, just start leading in to where I'm going. So, for example, like if you're listening to this as a clinician, this is like advanced training, but I'm just going to tell everybody how I do it. So say, for example, I'm working with a child who's really afraid of getting a shot, a needle phobia. What's the skill that I would love to be able to teach them using their imagination, using their ability to creatively think about things differently? Well, what I really want to do is allow them to kind of disconnect from their arm a little bit, or not feel things in their arm, and maybe go somewhere else. Like, isn't it nice if you were getting a shot that you could just leave your arm at the doctor's office and you could go to London, or you could go to Hogwarts, or you could go to the beach? Wouldn't that be a cool thing to be able to do? So I would just start talking about that. So what I am teaching them is how to disconnect from something temporarily that it's really fine to disconnect from. So it might be your arm. And I tell this story in the book. I was working with a young girl who had leukemia. And of course, she had to have a lot of medical treatments, and a lot of it was really uncomfortable. She was having chemo. She was in the hospital a lot. But the thing that most bothered her was that her parents were going through a really acrimonious divorce. So they would come into her hospital room and she felt terrible and she was scared, and it was very draining and awful in all those ways that it would be. But her parents would fight with each other over her. So they'd be standing on either sides of her bed, snarky at each other and whatever. And she said, I think I can handle the leukemia, but I can't handle my parents fighting when I feel so terrible. So I did a session with her where as soon as her parents started doing that, she could close her eyes and transport herself to another place. And she decided to go fly around. I think actually she did go fly around London or Paris or something like that. She pretended that she was on a magic carpet ride or she had wings or something. And it was just teaching her in a very literal way, in a very graphic way, you do not have to sit here and be trapped by your parents' emotional immaturity. I gave her permission to go, which she couldn't go in her body because she was in her bed. She had leukemia, but I gave her permission to go. So those are just sort of some of the examples. I don't have to do a long induction is what it's called. So lots of times people are trained in hypnosis and they might say, all right, I'm going to count from 100 down to 0, 100, 99, 98. And it's like, oh God, speed it up. I can very simply say, I would like you to just take a breath, settle in, and let's figure out how we can make this better. And then I am going to start setting it up that I am giving examples of how you do exactly what I want you to do. The content might be different, but the process is going to be the same. So if my goal is to help you disconnect, I might start telling some stories about how things disconnect. If my goal is to help you step into uncertainty, I might tell stories about how people step into uncertainty, how Thomas Edison decided that he was going to figure out how to create a light bulb, and he had to try over and over and over again, not knowing how it was going to turn out. If I am talking to a child who's very rigid, I might give examples of flexibility. It might be in nature. I might talk about cooked spaghetti. So I'm always feeding in these images, these ideas, these stories that are very clearly headed toward my therapeutic target.
What value do you see the hypnotic state providing versus just having the discussion that you might typically have with someone?
Yeah, and that's the crux of it. Why not just tell you like, hey, be more flexible, or don't be so stuck in your old story, or when you're getting your shot, just imagine you're somewhere else, right? Why can't we just say that? So that has been the subject of an enormous amount of research and study. Stanford University has a hypnosis lab. Most of the big universities in this country have studied hypnosis. It's actually widely studied and used in Europe compared to in the United States. So the answer to that question is something happens, and there's this whole debate about how it happens and what happens, but something happens in which you are more available or more suggestible when we allow you to go into this focused state. You know, you could read a gazillion books about it. And when I was writing this book, I did read a gazillion books about it. Some people think that it is a skill that you have, that everybody has. Some people think that it's something that some people have and some people don't have. And so you should do a hypnotic susceptibility test before you hypnotize somebody. I don't really see that. I wasn't trained that way. I don't believe that. There are some people who think that it is a completely different state of consciousness. And there's a lot of talk sometimes about this is your unconscious. I don't really use that language. I just see it as this interesting, incredibly focused state in which, for whatever reason, things are more malleable. And I can't really explain it. I've certainly experienced it, but it's still kind of a mystery to me. But at the very same time that it's a mystery, it makes perfect sense because we all have these imaginations that can take us to other places. We all have the ability to create symptoms in our body. We all have the ability to smell something or taste something in a different way just because somebody's talking about it. For me, it just has to do with putting you in this focused state in which, for some reason, you're more susceptible.
I'll bring up another trend that I know very little about. And I always thought it would be fun to talk about this on an episode, but neither of us have any experience with this and probably no interest. Is it called microdosing? Mushrooms, and people talk about, oh, I'll make all these new neural pathways and I'll come out of this and I'll no longer have this anxiety about this or this. I mean, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's funny you should bring that up because I was just talking about this with some clinician friends of mine because we were talking about psilocybin. And one of the things that, I mean, we could say trendy, but they're resuming research about it is the use of mushrooms, psilocybin, ketamine, basically to unstick people and to give them this experience. And I think probably psilocybin is one of those things that, like hypnosis, right? You're like, oh, I'm tripping on psilocybin or I'm doing LSD or I'm shrooming. But also they have found, and the research is very compelling. And it was really actually going places before the Nixon era, if you look at it historically, and now it's kind of back. But it does seem like when the brain kind of loosens up in some way, that people have these profound experiences of creating new neural pathways. And as I said, I was just talking to my clinician friends about this yesterday, in fact. And they said the way that they describe it is that, say there's a fresh snow on a hill and you have a sled and you go down that same hill on the same track over and over and over again, and you create the track that your sled is going to go down. When you take psilocybin or mushrooms or whatever, it's like there's new fallen snow and there's no more tracks. And you get to create a different track. But it's the same sort of concept that what happens when we're freed of our pathways and we're allowed to see things in a different way or to experience things in a different way. So it does seem to have some pretty interesting overlaps. And I will tell you, after talking to my clinician friends yesterday, I want to do it. These are people that I know very well and that I value, that they are so smart and so capable. But it seems to have some overlap of what happens when we put ourselves into a state, into a mindset, whatever you want to call it, and it allows us to sort of free ourselves from the patterns or the thoughts or the beliefs that were keeping us stuck.
But let's take a break. And when we come back, I'm ready to hear some more like real examples you've had in your practice.
Okay. It's finally spring. The sun is shining. You know how it is. You go through your wardrobe and you think, okay, so I need to freshen things up. Well, Quince has got you covered. I don't know if you wear t-shirts like I do, but they have a cotton modal scoop T-neck 3-pack for $36. 3 high-quality t-shirts. I already have several of their t-shirts. I love them. Everything with Quince is priced 50 to 80% less than what you'd find at similar brands. They work directly with top artisans, cutting out the middlemen. Quince gives you luxury without the markup. And Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, premium fabrics and finishes. If you are looking to add some amazing essentials to your summer wardrobe, treat your closet to a little summer glow up with Quince. Go to quince.com/fluster for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/fluster to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/fluster. So I've been hearing a lot about women's health and metabolism and how we can maximize our fitness and our diet and exercise and all of this stuff. And it can get pretty complicated. It can get a little overwhelming. Lumen is the way to figure out how to monitor your metabolism. It's the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath. On the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs. It gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, your workouts, your sleep, even stress management. How does it work? Well, all you have to do is breathe into your Lumen first thing in the morning, and you'll know what's going on with your metabolism, whether you're burning mostly fats or carbs. It gives you a personalized nutrition plan for that day based on your measurements. It just makes it easy. Your metabolism is your body's engine. It's how your body turns the food you eat into fuel that keeps you going. And isn't it great to have a device that helps you figure this out, that makes it simple? It gives you recommendations to improve your metabolic health. It can also track your cycle, as well as the onset of menopause, and adjust your recommendations to keep your metabolism healthy through hormonal shifts so you can keep up your energy and stave off those cravings. Spring back into your health and fitness. Go to lumen.me/fluster to get 15% off your Lumen. That's LUMEN.me/fluster for 15% off your purchase. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode. So shopping for rugs is challenging. It can be overwhelming, and you don't really know what you're getting, the quality, they're expensive, so you want to make the right decision. Well, I'm here to tell you about Revival Rugs. Revival was created to disrupt the rug industry, which is filled with notoriously overpriced pieces or low-quality rugs that won't last. So Revival rugs are works of art. They're beautiful. They curate one-of-a-kind collections, new rugs, vintage rugs, without the markup. You go on the website, they show the rugs in pictures in rooms. You can get a really good idea of what these rugs will look like. My son just got the Halo rug, an 8x10, an incredibly reasonably priced rug for a guy that just bought his first house, with an eye on evolving customer needs and dedication to blending tradition with innovation. Revival rugs continue to weave quality, style, and purpose into every piece. Visit revivalrugs.com/fluster and use the code FLUSTER20 for 20% off your first order. Once again, that's revivalrugs.com/fluster and use code FLUSTER20. One more time, that's revivalrugs.com/FLUSTER with the code FLUSTER20 to save 20% off. Okay, so now back to the show.
I started actually doing hypnotherapy with one of your friends.
Yes, and also, lest you forget that we also did it for childbirth.
Yeah, well, I have a couple more questions. Just like with the role of hypnotherapy in the field, you did come about it through the childbirth hypnobabies or hypnotherapy for pain management, right?
Michael Yapko actually was the first person who introduced me to hypnosis. So I had been trained in hypnosis long before I started using it for childbirth. I had this early retirement when I got pregnant with my first son, and then I used hypnosis for childbirth, and then I had another baby, and I used hypnosis for childbirth, and then I was teaching moms. A big part of my practice was that I was using hypnosis for childbirth. But I'd been doing hypnosis for 10 years before that.
And I just remember you describing when you were my sister-in-law and we're talking, well, you still are, and we were talking about birth prep and everything for me. But you, for your second baby especially, when most people have a little less fear when it's not this brand new thing, that you just like threw yourself in a state and freaked the nurses out because it was so easy, right?
So both kids, I had very uncomplicated births for both boys, but the second one in particular, I remember I was like 7 centimeters dilated, and they checked me and they were like, oh my God, like, what has she been doing in there? And I was just lying. And at one point they were like, hey, so we're going to need a little something from you, like maybe just a little like pushing, or could you kind of wake up a little bit? Like, I was fully present, but I was just completely in a state of
opening your flower.
Opening my flower, baby. And my flower opened and a baby came out. Yeah. So it was pretty cool.
That would be an instance where people may have had a misunderstanding of what you were doing.
Mm-hmm.
People will have a misunderstanding of hypnosis in general. Maybe that they are not of their own mind, that they could be taken advantage of in some manner. What are some of the myths that you've had to bust for people?
Yeah, you can't make somebody do something that they don't want to do. It's a partnership. It's a collaboration. And so I couldn't hypnotize somebody to rob a bank. And like in the movie Get Out, that's what they did. They hypnotized somebody to do something that was not morally in keeping with who they were. That's not how it works. The hypnotist is not in control of the person. You are fully aware. Like you may not remember when I do a hypnosis session with somebody, for one, I record every single one that I do. They generally last about 20 to 25 minutes, sometimes longer and shorter. If it's a little kid, it's like 7 minutes. I record everything that I do so that they can listen to it later in practice. But the goal that we set forth together, to have a birth or to get a shot or to be able to try new foods or to sleep in your own bed, it's very clear what we're aiming for. I am not controlling the person. I am offering them a way to get there. I am offering something that makes it interesting or possible for them to get to a place that they want to get to. So I'm just sort of the facilitator. And one of the things that often happens when I do a session with somebody is they finish the session and they go, wow, I never thought of it that way. My goal is to create a session specifically for that person. I don't use scripts. There's nothing pre-written. I don't read anything. A lot of people who do hypnosis, they say, oh, do you have a script for such and such? Nope. The person is in front of me. I ask questions. I figure out what they want, where we're going to go, and then I create that session in that interview, which doesn't have to be very long, and then off we go. People will sometimes remember every word. Sometimes people will say, gosh, it felt like you were talking to me for 5 minutes. And I'll say, no, well, actually it was 29. And they're so surprised by that. So there is this time distortion thing that happens, which also happens naturally, right? Have you ever had a conversation with somebody and you think you've been talking for a little while and you look at your watch and it's 3 hours because you were so engaged in the conversation? My goal is to create an experience that leads the person to the place we want to get them to go. If you're having a baby, what do you want to do? Well, you want to stay out of your own way. You want to let your body do what it knows how to do. You want to recognize and experience the sensations that you're having are all part of a normal process. And you want to facilitate what is a very natural process without one's fear or tension or preconceived notions hamper or hinder. So that's when I do hypnosis for birth, that's really what I'm doing. And it's pretty darn effective. I mean, I definitely have a metaphorical mind, and I definitely can come up with things on the fly, and I do use language pretty naturally. And so I understand all that. But it's definitely a skill that you can learn with practice. And the thing about it, and this is what I learned from Michael, this is what I say all the time, there aren't that many different types of problems that human beings have. So the content might be different, but the theme or the place where you get stuck is really repetitive. A therapist might say, well, I have 4 really good stories about being more flexible. Or I have an example that I give that really supports the idea of how important it is to try new things or how to get out of our own way. To your point, say I'm doing a session for birth, and there's a whole other level of it is that I'm using what I know about the person too, but that's a whole nother thing. Say somebody is having a baby and they also are a lumberjack. I'm going to try and connect those two experiences somehow. But think about falling asleep. Think about a child that's having difficulty falling asleep. Well, one of the messages I do when I do a hypnosis session for sleep with kids and adults is that your body knows what to do. And the goal is to get out of the way. The goal is to let your mind wander to a place, because ever since you were born, every single day, you have fallen asleep. And you don't have to tell your heart to beat, and you don't have to tell your toenails to grow. And when you eat your peanut butter and jelly sandwich, you don't instruct your digestive system where to send this and where to send that. And so isn't it interesting that when it comes to falling asleep, that you can get out of the way and let your very capable, wonderful, amazing body do exactly what it knows how to do. And if you have medical procedures, when we look at the treatment of chronic pain, hypnosis, pediatric hypnosis is used a lot in emergency rooms with kids. It's used a lot in cancer treatment with kids. It's used a lot in pain management with kids. And the message is the same, is that you have the capacity to disconnect right now from the thing that you'd like to disconnect from. What you focus on, you amplify. We use that all the time too. And then you have the capacity to disconnect. And you have this chronic health condition. I had a little girl who had a condition where she had to have an injection once a week, and she was terribly afraid of needles and the whole idea of it. And every week it was just agony for her parents to give her this shot. She would start worrying about it the night before. And we did a hypnosis session that taught her that when her parents said, it's time for your shot, she would sit back, close her eyes, and go off to somewhere that she liked to go off to, and then come back after the shot was over. Did she feel the shot? Sure. But her relationship to it and her response to it was completely different. These are the really concrete things that we can do with hypnosis that are really pretty amazing.
If listeners are interested in exploring this for themselves or for their kids, what would they do?
So there are a few resources for hypnosis. One is the acronym, the way we say it is NIFTY. It's the National Pediatric Hypnosis Training Institute. You can find qualified clinicians there. Also, ASH, the American Society of Clinical Hypnosis, has referrals and people are on that list too. Because one of the really important things that I need to say is that hypnosis in itself is not regulated by any professional board. So the mental health board, medical boards, you can go and get a hypnosis certification in a weekend. You can go to a person who says, I'm going to train you in hypnosis. And people who call themselves hypnotists, they're not allowed to say hypnotherapy, actually. They say that they do hypnosis. A lot of them have absolutely no clinical training. The way that I view hypnosis, it is a part of my clinical repertoire. And the reason I can do hypnosis for people who are depressed, for people who are anxious, for people who have phobias, for people who have chronic pain, is because I have 35 years of clinical training, so I know what I'm dealing with. So if you want to get hypnosis for your child, go to somebody who is a licensed professional, not a certified hypnotist. You want to make sure that they have the training and the experience and the legitimacy to deal with what it is that you're treating.
What's literally going on at a college hypnotist show? People are like, cluck like a chicken in front of these 200 people, and then they cluck like a chicken. Is it because they're like, yeah, this is awesome, I'm going to cluck like a chicken? I never volunteered for that show.
Yeah. So one of the things, and this is one of the things that's been studied too, is that there appears to be, and I think it's probably true, a very strong social component to this. When you are in a situation and they ask for volunteers, the person who raises their hand is basically saying, I agree to be made a fool of. And then there is social cooperation. And this is one of the big debates that goes on in the literature. And it has a lot to do with the relationship. It has a lot to do with expectancy. That's probably a lot of what's going on. There are some people who are very, very good at going into a deep, deep trance. Now, let me just say parenthetically that the research also shows that the level, your perceived depth of trance has absolutely no bearing on the effectiveness of the intervention. I know that sounds a little wonky, but how deep you think you are doesn't impact how much the treatment works. But there are people who seem to be able to go into these deep, deep trances. They're called hypnotic virtuosos. These are people, they use hypnosis as the only anesthesia during surgery. I have seen a video of somebody getting their thyroid removed with hypnosis as the only anesthesia. Not everybody can do that. Everybody can be hypnotized, but not everybody can do that. So at those hypnosis shows, they are doing little tests in the audience. They are doing these screenings and they're picking out those people that would probably be able to get a cavity filled with no Novocaine. They have some quality about them or some ability to go into a very deep trance. And that's how they do it successfully. They're looking for those people in the audience. So the way you know, so say somebody comes into me and says, I want to do hypnosis, or they don't come to me to do hypnosis. I say, hey, I think I have this tool that I like to use with you. I don't really need them to be a hypnotic virtuoso because I'm not removing anybody's thyroid. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I mean, I knew somebody who had knee surgery with hypnosis as the only anesthesia. And then he went back to have a vasectomy with hypnosis as the only anesthesia. And about 3.5 seconds in, he was like, I'm out. But if we look at sort of the bell curve of people, most people can use hypnosis in a way that's beneficial, but not everybody could get their thyroid taken out with hypnosis as the only anesthesia.
I just think it's very bizarre that someone discovers they have this really powerful talent and they're like, how will I use it?
Yeah, how will I use it? Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I used it to have a baby without really much discomfort. That's how I used it.
Well, okay, actually, you just mentioned something. So there are a lot of women who could have found it so effective in childbirth for anesthesia. I could imagine them going on.
Yes.
And getting their thyroid removed.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me.
I mean, one time I was running through the house, I was playing with my kids, and you know when you bang your big toe, like you smash your big toe on a door frame, I smashed my big toe on this heavy wooden table, and it hurt so bad. And I was like, ah! I screamed. And then I lied down on the room floor and I said to my boys, I'll be right back. And I just like went into my brain and I took myself to the top of this particular mountain in Montana. And I just was like, I'm just going to hang out here for a few minutes until this doesn't feel so awful. And I just laid there and I just went to Montana and then I came back and I'm like, okay. And it still hurt, but I wasn't like going to throw up anymore.
And then you looked in the mirror and you had a black marker mustache on your lips.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So it has all sorts of applications. And I feel like I just came out of the closet about the fact that I use it, but also I just love talking about it. And I think it's just an amazing thing. Athletes use it. Hypnosis can be used in motion. So if you watch a marathon runner who's really focused and you see and their eyes are sort of focused straight ahead and their shoulders are loose and their stride, they're using some sort of hypnotic process to keep them focused and steady versus the runner you might see whose shoulders are up and they're grimacing. You can see athletes using it in different ways. It's a state of extreme focus in which you can create sensations or disconnect from things or connect to things. It's pretty cool.
I'm sold.
All right.
I agree. The state of extreme focus, that's a great way to describe it.
Yeah. You know, musicians, it's sort of when you lose yourself, you know, when you're in the zone. And, you know, we all know that the mind is incredibly powerful. I always say it's just sort of harnessing our imagination for good rather than evil, which is what I'm trying to do with my treatment for anxiety all the time. You're capable of creating these incredibly powerful physical symptoms. You're capable of doing this to yourself. Well, let's use that same power. Thanks for listening. And if you found this podcast helpful, please give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It helps other people find this information.
And if you'd like to dig deeper on any of these topics, we have specialized playlists on our Spotify profile, and the link is in the show notes. Topics like teens, depression, and OCD. Bye, Lynn.
Bye, Robin.
Welcome to It Takes Energy, presented by Energy Transfer, where we talk all things oil and natural gas. Oil and gas drive our economy, ensure our country's security, and open pathways to brighter futures. The U.S. produces 13 million barrels of crude oil every day, enough to fill 800 Olympic swimming pools. But what is that oil used for? The gas we put in our cars is just the beginning. Nearly 50% of each barrel is refined into gasoline. Another 34% is refined into fuels like diesel and jet fuel, and the rest is used to make more than 96% of our everyday essentials, like the tennis shoes you wear, the cell phone you rely on, and medicines that help save lives. Look around, and you'll see the essential role oil and gas plays in our modern lives. Our world needs oil and gas, and people rely on us to deliver it. To learn more, visit ittakes.energy.com.